In the spring of 2010, on the night of May 1st under the shining lights of the MGM Grand Garden Arena in Las Vegas, a pivotal moment in boxing quietly unfolded. Amid a card headlined by the legendary Floyd Mayweather Jr. facing Shane Mosley, the co-main event brought together two fighters whose names carried different weight. One was a rising prodigy, the other a seasoned veteran. In the ring that night stood 19-year-old Saul Canelo Alvarez, already boasting an astonishing record of 31 wins and 1 draw, and across from him, the formidable Puerto Rican contender, Jose Miguel Cotto, an older, more experienced fighter with grit and power in his fists. Canelo was already becoming a household name in Mexico and quickly capturing international attention. Backed by the promotional might of Oscar de la Hoya's Golden Boy Promotions, he was being groomed as the next global superstar. His skills, poise, and charisma had brought him massive attention. Outside the ring, his life was just as dazzling. He was dating Marisol Gonzalez, a prominent television hostess and former Miss Universe contestant. But none of that mattered once the bell rang. All that glitter faded the moment the gloves touched, and leather met flesh under the scrutiny of referee Tony Weeks. The expectations were high. The narrative going into the bout was clear. Canelo Alvarez was expected to dominate. Analysts questioned whether he had truly been tested despite his impressive record. Critics whispered that his opposition had been relatively soft. This fight, a 10-rounder, was considered a step-up challenge. Cotto was no pushover. He was the brother of Miguel Cotto and had shared his own years inside the squared circle, battling tough opponents, absorbing punishment, and learning the lessons that come only with experience. He wasn't there to play the role of a stepping stone. He was there to win. As the first round began, the pace was cautious. Both fighters respected each other's skills and dangers. Canelo approached the opening moments with a sense of calculated movement. He stepped forward patiently, flicking jabs, testing the distance. His movements were tight, economic, and filled with purpose. Across the ring, Cotto stood like a coiled spring. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't wild. He was hunting. He waited for a mistake, for a lazy jab, for a dropped right hand. And when it came, he struck. Midway through the round, Cotto uncorked a left hook with perfect timing and brutal accuracy. It caught Canelo flush. The young star staggered backward. Momentarily, stunned, his balance betrayed as the ropes caught him. The MGM Grand erupted. The punch was clean, and for the first time in his professional career, Alvarez looked vulnerable. Wobbled and wide-eyed, he tried to regain composure as Cotto leapt forward, smelling blood and sensing a possible early finish. He piled on the pressure, unleashing a combination of punches that pinned Canelo to the ropes. The Mexican was forced to clinch, to move, to survive. It was an unfamiliar sight. This red-haired, calm-faced young man, always in control, now fighting to stay afloat. But survive he did. The bell rang, offering reprieve from the onslaught. He returned to his corner shaken but not broken. Eddie Reynoso, his trusted trainer and father figure, leaned in. His voice was firm and calm. He reminded his young fighter that there were 10 rounds, that he was the better boxer, that the fight wasn't lost in a single moment. Canelo listened, breathing deeply, nodding. He had learned a painful lesson in that first round, a reminder that raw talent alone wasn't enough. He needed patience, timing, and composure. As the second round opened, the tone of the fight shifted. Canelo, no longer the eager, forward-pressing young bull, began to move with even greater purpose. He studied Cotto's habits, his defensive rhythm, and his attack patterns. No longer caught off guard, he adapted, and then he struck. Timing a moment of vulnerability with surgical precision, Canelo fired an uppercut that was devastating in its execution. It landed square on Cotto's chin, and the veteran dropped like a tree falling in the forest. It was the kind of shot that changes fights, careers, and expectations. The crowd, still buzzing from the early scare, now roared with equal force as the Mexican prodigy reclaimed control of the narrative. But to his credit, Cotto rose. His head shook, attempting to clear the fog that had just enveloped him. His legs were shaky, his body damaged, but his spirit was intact. He pressed forward, firing back when possible. Still, the momentum had now firmly swung in Canelo's favor. Each round that followed became a chapter in a slow dismantling. Canelo did not rush for the knockout. He didn't smother his opponent with wild flurries. Instead, he boxed. He hunted. He placed shots with care, mixing uppercuts, hooks to the body and well-timed counters that made Cotto hesitate. His footwork allowed him to cut off the ring. His jab disrupted rhythm and his counters punished overextension. By the third and fourth rounds, Canelo's dominance was becoming undeniable. He targeted Cotto's body with vicious hooks that echoed through the arena. His uppercuts were timed between Cotto's own attacks, snapping his head back. Every step Cotto took backward was met with two from Canelo forward. He was relentless but not reckless. He understood range, tempo, and timing. He didn't waste energy. Each punch had purpose. Each movement spoke to a fighter beyond his years. Cotto, meanwhile, tried to respond with movement and strategy. He attempted to circle away, to jab and pivot, to create distance. At moments, he would land a decent shot, a right hand down the pipe or a check hook, but they lacked sting. The earlier confidence that had surged after the first round knockdown had now been replaced with caution. The veteran was now on the defensive, throwing more to stay in the fight than to take over. By the sixth round, the battle had become lopsided. Cotto's legs slowed. His hands dropped just a fraction of a second too early. His combinations became rare and his head movement less frequent. Canelo sensed it. He pressed harder, now mixing shots to the head and ribs in rapid-fire bursts that rattled the body and wore down the spirit. A particularly vicious uppercut in the seventh round lifted Cotto's head skyward. The body shots that followed bent him forward. Canelo was not merely winning rounds, he was dissecting an opponent brick by brick, shot by shot. There was a beauty in Canelo's work. Despite his youth, he never became reckless. He showed restraint and control, choosing to work rather than explode. His punches were clean and crisp. He slipped counters with slight head movement and then returned fire with an almost clinical exactness. Commentators ringside praised his discipline, noting how rare it was to see someone so young fighting with such intelligence. His hands were fast, yes, but it was his mind, his understanding of the ebb and flow of the fight, that impressed most. In the eighth round, the fatigue in Cotto became more visible. His shoulders slumped just slightly in the corner. His corner gave instructions, but the response was minimal. He fought with heart, but his body was betraying him. Each step was heavier. Each exchange became a gamble. Canelo didn't let up. He remained in the center of the ring, dictating pace, cutting off escape routes, and delivering punishment with surgical cruelty. And then came the ninth round, the crescendo of a brutal symphony. From the opening bell of the round, Canelo went on the attack with renewed fury. He unleashed combinations in rapid succession, the accuracy of his blows painting a picture of complete control. Cotto tried to fire back, but his shots were sluggish, lacking snap. He stumbled, his balance fading, his defensive guard cracking under the weight of Canelo's assault. Tony Weeks watched closely. Every referee understands the line between valor and danger, and that line was approaching quickly. With another barrage landing cleanly, a right cross followed by a left to the body, then an uppercut, Weeks had seen enough. He stepped in, waving off the bout to spare Cotto from unnecessary punishment. It was over. Canelo Alvarez had passed the test. Not with ease, but with resilience. He had survived a scare, responded with brilliance, and ultimately dominated. There was no wild celebration from Alvarez. He didn't jump on the ropes or scream toward the rafters. He simply raised his hand, nodded, and walked to his corner. It was the reaction of a fighter who understood that the mission had only just begun. This wasn't the final destination. It was the first checkpoint on a road paved in blood, sweat, and sacrifice. He hadn't just won, he had learned. He had taken a shot that rattled his equilibrium, steadied himself, and rebuilt the fight from that moment forward. For many, That night marked the moment Canelo Alvarez transformed from a promising prospect into a real contender. The myth of invincibility had been shattered early, but rather than crumble, he evolved. He showed fans and critics alike that he could take a shot, recover, and come back stronger. That he had the mentality required to endure the unforgiving nature of the sport. That he wasn't just a media creation or a golden boy product. He was the real thing. Years later, as his name would become synonymous with greatness, as he would go on to unify divisions, defeat champions, and headline pay-per-views across the globe, many would point to this night in Las Vegas as the turning point. Not the fights he won easily, not the ones where he barely broke a sweat, but this war against Jose Miguel Cotto, where he was wobbled, tested, and forced to find a new gear. That night, under the shimmering lights and the echoes of thousands of fans, Canelo Alvarez carved the first letter of his legend, and in doing so, he left no doubt that he was coming for the throne, and that he wasn't stopping until it was his.